Welcome, dear listener, to tonight's mystery, a tale woven with whispers, secrets, and the quiet brilliance of deduction. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell so you never miss another peaceful yet thrilling bedtime mystery. Now, let's begin our story, Murder Beneath the Lantern. Poirot's Sinister Night. Chapter 1. The Gathering Storm. In the resplendent halls of the Hôtel des Lanternes, perched like a jewel upon the rugged cliffs overlooking the glittering expanse of the Mediterranean Sea, the air was imbued with an intoxicating melange of jasmine blossoms and the briny tang of salt spray. It was the zenith of the 1933 season, an epoch when the crème de la crème of European society descended upon this bastion of opulence to evade the tedium of their quotidian existences. The hotel itself was a masterpiece of architectural grandeur, its marble floors polished to a mirror-like sheen, its crystal chandeliers suspended like frozen cascades of light, and its terraced gardens a veritable Eden adorned with exotic flora and illuminated by swaying Chinese lanterns imported from the distant Orient. These lanterns, with their intricate paper designs and soft ethereal glows, cast dancing shadows that seemed to whisper secrets to the night breeze. Yet, on this particular evening, as ominous clouds amassed on the horizon like harbingers of doom, an insidious undercurrent of tension simmered beneath the veneer of polite society, threatening to erupt like the storm that brewed overhead. Hercule Poirot, the inimitable Belgian detective whose reputation for unraveling the most labyrinthine enigmas preceded him across continents, had arrived at the hotel in pursuit of a much-coveted repose. His diminutive stature, impeccably attired in a bespoke suit of the finest wool, was offset by a waxed moustache that curled with mathematical precision and eyes that gleamed with the acuity of a rapier. Accompanying him was his steadfast companion, Captain Arthur Hastings, a gentleman of sturdy build and earnest demeanour, whose bluff English honesty provided a counterpoint to Poirot's continental finesse. Hastings, with his sandy hair neatly parted and a penchant for straightforward thinking, often served as the sounding board for Poirot's more esoteric ruminations. As they strolled along the winding garden paths, the lanterns above them swaying gently in the rising wind, Poirot paused to adjust his patent leather shoes, which gleamed under the ambient light. "Mon ami Hastings," he remarked in his precise, accented English, "one ventures to the Riviera in search of tranquillity, a balm for the weary soul. Yet I perceive that the little grey cells may not remain dormant for long. There is a certain electricity in the air, no?" Hastings, ever the optimist, chuckled heartily, his voice carrying over the faint murmur of waves crashing against the cliffs below. "Oh, come now, Poirot. You're on holiday. Surely even you can set aside the mysteries for a spot of sun and sea. Look at this place. It's paradise." But Poirot's keen gaze swept over the assembled guests with the scrutiny of an entomologist examining rare specimens. The occasion that evening was a gala dinner, hosted by the ill-fated Comte Victor de la Roche, a scion of ancient French nobility, whose occupation as a voracious collector of rare antiquities had elevated him to both enviable wealth and a cadre of envious adversaries. The Comte, a towering figure in his mid-50s with silver-streaked hair that lent him an air of distinguished authority, possessed piercing blue eyes that could disarm with a glance or intimidate with a stare. His psychological profile was one of unyielding arrogance, tempered by a secretive nature that concealed layers of Machiavellian cunning. Driven by an insatiable greed for artifacts, Etruscan vases, Egyptian scarabs, and Byzantine icons, He had amassed a fortune through dealings that often skirted the boundaries of legality, leaving a trail of embittered associates in his wake. Tonight, he presided over the event with the benevolence of a feudal lord, his laughter booming across the terrace as he mingled with his invitees. Among the suspects who would soon fall under Poirot's discerning eye were individuals of markedly distinct characters, each harbouring depths of motive shrouded in the veils of civility. Foremost was Madame Élise de la Roche, the Comte's wife, a woman of exquisite elegance whose raven hair was piled high in an elaborate coiffure, accentuating her swan-like neck, adorned with a string of pearls that caught the lantern light like captive stars. Her emerald eyes, framed by long lashes, flashed with an intensity that bespoke unspoken torments. Jealousy, perhaps, festering like a hidden wound from her husband's notorious infidelities. Psychologically, she was a paragon of restrained passion, a lady scorned who channeled her resentments into a facade of impeccable poise, yet one whose motive might well lie in securing the vast inheritance unencumbered by further betrayals. Beside her stood Monsieur Henri Duval, the Comte's business partner in antiquities trading, a tall and angular man with sharp features, a thin moustache that twitched with nervous energy, and an ambitious glint in his dark eyes that betrayed a soul ever scheming for advancement. Duval's psychology was that of the consummate opportunist, a man who viewed alliances as ladders to be climbed and discarded. His resentment toward the Comte stemmed from protracted financial disputes, debts unpaid, profits unevenly divided, providing a motive steeped in pecuniary desperation. Then there was Miss Sophia Langton, the Comte's young English secretary, a blonde vision of apparent timidity with soft, rounded features, downcast blue eyes, and a demeanour that suggested fragility. Yet beneath this veneer lurked a heart wounded by unrequited affection, her psychology one of simmering resentment toward the man who had toyed with her emotions, promising elevation only to relegate her to the shadows. Her motive, the sting of romantic betrayal, compounded by professional slights. Dr. Paul Renaud, the hotel's resident physician, presented a contrast in his middle-aged composure, with wire-rimmed spectacles perched on an aquiline nose and a calm, almost inscrutable demeanour that masked deeper secrecies. His psychological profile revealed a man haunted by past indiscretions, perhaps a medical error or ethical lapse that rendered him vulnerable to blackmail, furnishing a motive rooted in self-preservation. Finally, the Baroness Olga von Strass, an imperious guest of Teutonic nobility, cut a regal figure with her silver hair swept into a severe chignon, cold steely eyes that pierced like daggers, and a vindictive soul that nursed grudges with the patience of a glacier. Her motive lay in revenge for a long-ago affront. The Comte had outmanoeuvred her in acquiring a family heirloom, a slight she had vowed to repay. As the guests converged beneath the canopy of lanterns, their conversations flowed with the effervescence of champagne, laced with undercurrents of artifice. "My dear Comte," the Baroness intoned with a politeness as frosty as the impending storm, "your collection burgeons with each passing season. One cannot help but marvel at the extraordinary lengths to which you extend yourself in its pursuit." Her words, delivered with an arched brow, carried a subtle barb, hinting at the dubious provenance of his treasures. The Comte, undeterred, chuckled with dismissive grandeur, raising his glass in a toast. "Ah, Baroness, the pursuit of beauty and antiquity knows no bounds, no frontiers. It is the elixir of the soul." His voice resonated across the terrace, drawing nods and murmurs from the assembly. But as the night deepened, the wind howled with increasing ferocity, causing the lanterns to swing erratically, their lights flickering like uncertain beacons. Thunder rumbled in the distance, an ominous prelude, and the first drops of rain began to patter upon the flagstones. It was then that a piercing cry shattered the conviviality, echoing from the garden's shadowed edge, where the cliffs dropped precipitously to the sea. Hastings, with his military instincts, rushed forward, Poirot following with surprising alacrity for a man of his build. The guests trailed behind, their faces etched with a melange of curiosity and dread. There, beneath one of the flickering Chinese lanterns, its cord dangling ominously like a noose, lay the Comte Victor de la Roche, his body sprawled in undignified repose. His face was contorted in a rictus of agony, foam flecking his lips, and a faint, acrid scent of bitter almonds hung in the air, betraying the presence of cyanide. In his rigid hand, he clutched a cocktail glass, its contents spilled upon the earth. Poirot knelt with deliberate care, his gloved fingers probing the scene without disturbance. Observe, Hastings, the footprints imprinted in the soft earth, leading away into the encroaching shadows. They are fresh, and of a size suggesting a man of average build. And regardez, this torn fragment of fabric snagged upon the thorny bush nearby. Silk of the most exquisite quality, perhaps from a lady's gown or scarf. His voice, though soft, carried an undercurrent of excitement, the thrill of the chase igniting his little grey cells. The guests gathered in a semicircle, their expressions a tableau of feigned shock and concealed guilt. Madame de la Roche's hand trembling as she clutched her pearls, Duval's eyes darting suspiciously, Miss Langton's face paling to the hue of alabaster, Dr. Renaud kneeling to confirm the obvious with a professional nod, and the Baroness observing with detached curiosity. The storm broke fully then, rain cascading in sheets, as if the heavens themselves wept for the fallen aristocrat. Inspector Giraud arrived shortly, summoned by the hotel staff, his brusque manner cutting through the chaos. But Poirot, rising with dignity, knew that this sinister night had only just begun, the threads of deception waiting to be unravelled by his unparalleled intellect. Chapter 2. Shadows of Suspicion. The tempest descended upon the Hôtel des Lanternes with a ferocity that mirrored the turmoil now engulfing its inhabitants. Rain lashed against the mullioned windows of the Grand Salon, like the accusatory fingers of fate, while thunder rolled across the Mediterranean sky, shaking the very foundations of the opulent edifice. Lightning illuminated the room in stark, intermittent flashes, casting elongated shadows that danced grotesquely upon the gilded walls and Persian carpets. The guests, hitherto the epitome of refined composure, were herded into this sanctuary by the local gendarme, Inspector Lucien Giraud, a man of brusque efficiency with a square jaw, a perpetually furrowed brow, and a moustache that twitched like a barometer of his impatience. His disdain for foreign interlopers, particularly those of Belgian extraction, was as palpable as the humidity in the air. "Monsieur Poirot," he declared in a voice gravelly from years of issuing commands, "this is a straightforward affair of poison. We shall conduct interrogations forthwith and apprehend the perpetrator with Gallic precision. Your methods, they are superfluous here." Poirot, undeterred by the inspector's condescension, adjusted the lapels of his impeccable suit with meticulous care, his green eyes sparkling with that peculiar intensity which betokened the engagement of his renowned little grey cells. "Ah, Inspector Giraud, simplicity is oft the diaphanous veil concealing profound complexity. The human psyche, it is a labyrinth of motives and deceptions. Permit me to assist. The order and method, they shall prevail." Beside him, Captain Hastings shifted uncomfortably, his honest face etched with concern, his mind grappling with the sudden shift from gala merriment to macabre investigation. "Dashed bad luck, Poirot," he murmured. "Poor chap, gone in an instant. Who could have done such a thing?" The salon, with its velvet upholstered divans, ormolu clocks ticking inexorably, and a grand piano silent in the corner, became the stage for the unfolding drama. Candles flickered in silver sconces, their flames wavering in the draughts that seeped through the storm-battered casements, supplementing the dim electric lights that hummed overhead. The assembled suspects, their finery now dishevelled by the night's events, formed a tableau of unease. Madame de la Roche perched rigidly on a chaise longue, her emerald eyes veiled by a lace handkerchief that she dabbed at intervals. Monsieur Duval pacing with the restless energy of a caged panther. Miss Langton huddled in a corner, her blonde tresses falling loosely about her pale face. Dr. Renaud standing with clinical detachment, his spectacles reflecting the candlelight, and the Baroness von Strass, enthroned in an armchair with regal disdain, her steely gaze surveying the room as if it were a battlefield. Interrogations commenced amid this charged atmosphere, the rain's relentless tattoo providing a sombre accompaniment. Inspector Giraud, notebook in hand, began with Madame de la Roche, his questions blunt and unyielding. "Madame, where were you precisely when your husband met his demise?" She lifted her chin, her voice a tremulous whisper laced with aristocratic hauteur. "I was in the powder room, Inspector, attending to my toilette. The Comte's gatherings can be so taxing on one's composure." Yet, as Poirot observed from his vantage point by the fireplace, a subtle inconsistency emerged. A chambermaid, questioned discreetly by Hastings, recalled glimpsing Madame near the garden's edge mere moments before the fatal cry rent the air. Her psychology, that of a woman long accustomed to suppressing volcanic passions beneath a veneer of decorum, suggested a motive rooted in matrimonial betrayal. The Comte's wanderings, whispered about in society salons, had doubtless festered like an untreated wound, prompting visions of an inheritance unshared and a life liberated from humiliation. Next, Giraud turned his scrutiny upon Monsieur Henri Duval, whose sharp features tightened under the onslaught. "Monsieur, you were the Comte's associate in antiquities. Disputes, they are common in such ventures, non?" Duval halted his pacing, his thin moustache quivering with indignation. "Disputes? Bah! He owed me thousands, profits from our last expedition to Egypt, squandered on his frivolities. But murder? I am a man of business, not barbarism." His alibi claimed an earlier stroll in the gardens, yet Poirot noted with interest that the footprints near the body, impressed deeply into the rain-softened earth, matched the size and tread of Duval's polished brogues. Psychologically, Duval was the archetype of the ambitious climber, a soul driven by avarice and opportunism, willing to scale any precipice for gain. This clue, however, Poirot suspected to be a red herring, planted perhaps to divert attention from subtler machinations. Miss Sophia Langton, when summoned, approached with the timidity of a fawn, her soft features flushed and her downcast eyes avoiding the inspector's gaze. "Miss Langton, as the Comte's secretary, you were privy to his confidences. Any intimacies?" Giraud probed with less than delicate tact. A blush suffused her cheeks, and she whispered, "He promised much, advancement, affection, but delivered naught but heartache." From her reticule, she produced a torn cufflink, engraved with the Comte's initials, claiming it as a memento of their association. Yet Poirot's acute observation revealed it matched one absent from the victim's shirt sleeve, suggesting either complicity or a frame. Her psychology bespoke a resentful heart, the quiet desperation of the overlooked, motive enough for a crime of passion veiled as timidity. Dr. Paul Renaud, the resident physician, responded to questioning with the measured calm of his profession, his spectacles perched precariously as he confirmed the diagnosis. Cyanide, without doubt. A swift toxin, administered via the cocktail glass. The bitter almond scent is unmistakable. But beneath his inscrutable facade, Poirot discerned a secretive undercurrent. A search of his quarters, authorized by Giraud, uncovered a blackmail note in cryptic script. "Your past error shall be exposed unless..." The doctor's psychology was that of the haunted guardian, burdened by an ethical lapse, perhaps a fatal misdiagnosis in years prior, rendering him susceptible to extortion, a motive entwined with self-preservation. The Baroness Olga von Strass, interrogated last, met Giraud's inquiries with the cold imperiousness of her noble lineage. "Inspector, you dare suggest I, a von Strass, would stoop to poison? The Comte pilfered my family's heirloom, a priceless Fabergé egg, decades ago. Revenge? I have savoured the thought, but my methods are more refined." Her steely eyes gleamed with vindictive amusement, and Poirot noted a silk scarf draped about her shoulders, its hue matching the torn fragment snagged near the body. Yet she insisted it had been misplaced earlier in the evening, a convenient alibi or another red herring. Psychologically, the Baroness was a repository of ancient grudges, a woman who fermented vendettas like vintage wine, her motive a tapestry of historical slight and unyielding pride. As the interrogations concluded, the storm raged unabated, the salon's atmosphere thick with unspoken accusations. Poirot, retreating to a shadowed alcove, pondered deeply, his moustache twitching in rhythmic contemplation. "The lantern, mon ami Hastings. It illuminates the path, yet casts elongated shadows of deceit. Who among them turned the benevolent light to an instrument of darkness?" Hastings, loyal but perplexed, ventured a hypothesis. "The wife surely, Poirot. Jealousy is a potent brew. Or perhaps Duval, with his financial woes." "Patience, my good Hastings," Poirot replied with an enigmatic smile. "The clues, they whisper softly amid the thunder. The footprints, the fabric, the inconsistencies in chronology. They form a mosaic, but one piece is yet obscured. We must delve deeper into the psyches, the hidden chambers of the soul." Outside, the Mediterranean lashed the cliffs with unrelenting fury, as if nature itself conspired to guard the secrets of the night. The guests dispersed to their chambers under watchful eyes, but sleep would elude them, haunted by the spectre of suspicion. Poirot, however, remained vigilant, his little grey cells weaving the threads of evidence into a net that would ensnare the guilty. The sinister night pressed on, its shadows lengthening with each passing hour. Chapter 3. Veils of Deception. As the first tentative rays of dawn pierced the storm-tossed skies over the French Riviera, the Hôtel des Lanternes emerged from the night's tumult like a beleaguered sentinel, its terraced gardens sodden and dishevelled under the weight of the deluge. The Mediterranean, usually a placid expanse of azure, churned restlessly against the cliffs below, its waves crashing with a rhythmic fury that echoed the unrest within the hotel's walls. The air, freshened by the rain, carried the mingled scents of wet earth, salt spray, and the faint, lingering perfume of night-blooming jasmine, a deceptive calm that belied the veils of deception now shrouding the inhabitants. Puddles reflected the paling clouds, and the Chinese lanterns, many extinguished by the gale, dangled forlornly from their cords, their paper husks tattered like forgotten secrets. Hercule Poirot, ever the early riser, despite the exigencies of the previous evening, had ventured forth into the gardens at first light, his patent leather shoes navigating the muddy paths with fastidious care. Accompanied by the ever-dutiful Captain Hastings, who stifled a yawn behind his hand, Poirot's keen eyes scanned the scene of the crime with the precision of a master cartographer charting unknown territories. "Regardez, mon ami," he intoned, pointing to the soft earth beneath the fateful lantern, where the Comte's body had lain. The footprints, they have been partially effaced by the rain, yet their imprint remains, deep, suggesting a person of substantial weight, perhaps a man. But observe this, a secondary set, lighter, overlapping as if in haste. Hastings knelt, his brow furrowed in concentration. "By Jove, Poirot, you're right. Could be a woman's. Slender heel, I'd say. And look here, a blonde hair entangled in the lantern's cord, fluttering like a banner of betrayal." Poirot nodded approvingly, his moustache twitching with satisfaction. "Précisément. The hair, it is of a shade akin to Miss Langton's tresses, and nearby a discarded vial, empty but with residues that emit the telltale odor of cyanide. Fingerprints upon it are smudged, as if wiped in panic, yet the hair clings stubbornly. Aha, but too patent, too conspicuous for the truly culpable. The guilty, they do not scatter such breadcrumbs. This is the artifice of misdirection. His little grey cells, invigorated by the crisp morning air, whirred with activity, weaving disparate threads into a nascent tapestry. Returning to the hotel, where Inspector Giraud had established a makeshift headquarters in a private salon, Poirot shared his findings with a mixture of collaboration and subtle superiority. Giraud, nursing a strong café au lait, snorted derisively. "Footprints and hairs, mere trifles. We French rely on logic, not theatrical flourishes." Yet he dispatched gendarmes to secure the evidence, his moustache bristling with reluctant acknowledgement. The suspects, summoned once more, displayed varying degrees of fatigue and weariness, their psychologies laid bare under the relentless scrutiny of day. Madame Elise de la Roche, her raven hair now loosely bound, and her emerald eyes shadowed by sleeplessness, was the first to face renewed questioning. Seated in the salon with its heavy drapes partially drawn against the intrusive light, she maintained her aristocratic poise, though her fingers betrayed her by twisting a pearl necklace with undue force. "Madame," Poirot inquired gently, his voice a soothing counterpoint to Giraud's brusqueness. "Your alibi of the powder room, it crumbles like a chateau de cartes. A guest overheard raised voices near the lantern, you and the Comte engaged in a contretemps moments before his cry." Her composure faltered, a flush rising to her cheeks. It was nothing, a trifling disagreement over his indiscretions. I returned to the terrace immediately after. Yet her psychology, that of a woman whose jealousy had simmered into a cauldron of resentment, suggested deeper fissures. The inheritance, vast and unencumbered by further betrayals, loomed as a motive, veiled by her elegant denials. Monsieur Henri Duval, summoned next, entered with the swagger of a man accustomed to boardroom battles, though his sharp features were etched with strain. "These footprints you prattle about, they are mine, from an earlier promenade," he asserted, his thin moustache quivering. Poirot, leaning forward with feigned casualness, revealed the forged documents discovered in a discreet search of Duval's suite. Ledgers altered to exaggerate the Comte's debts. "Monsieur, your ambition, it blinds you. These papers, they speak of desperation." Duval's eyes narrowed, his opportunist soul recoiling. "Forgeries, preposterous. Someone plants them to incriminate me." A red herring, perhaps, but his timeline placed him near the lantern during the gala's toast, an inconsistency that thickened the veil of suspicion. Miss Sophia Langton, her timidity amplified by the morning's revelations, trembled as the blonde hair was presented. It could be mine," she admitted in a whisper, her downcast eyes filling with tears. "I was in the garden, yes, to clear my head from the Comte's cruelties. He spurned me, after promises of love." Poirot's gaze softened, probing her resentful heart. "And the cufflink, mademoiselle, it was not a gift, but torn in struggle." She nodded, her psychology unveiling a narrative of unrequited passion, twisted into vengeful impulse. Yet, a guest testimony placed her in conversation with Madame de la Roche during the critical moments, hinting at an alliance or misdirection. Dr. Paul Renaud, with his spectacles polished to a gleam and his demeanour as inscrutable as a locked apothecary cabinet, examined the vial with professional detachment. Cyanide, indeed, readily obtainable for one in my position. The blackmail note from his quarters, now laid bare, alluded to a past medical error involving the Baroness's family, a fatal misdiagnosis that had haunted him. He threatened exposure, Renaud confessed, his calm cracking like fine porcelain. But murder, I am a healer, not a destroyer. His secretive profile, however, concealed access to the toxin, and a timeline gap during the evening's mingling provided opportunity, weaving him deeper into the web. The Baroness Olga von Strass, regal even in dishabille, met the accusations with a laugh as cold as alpine winds. "The silk fragment, from my scarf, yes, but lost earlier, as I informed you. And the blackmail? Dr. Renaud and I share a history, but it binds us in mutual silence, not conspiracy." Her vindictive soul, nursing the grudge over the stolen heirloom, suggested a revenge plot fermented over years. Yet, her psychology, that of a strategist who preferred subtle ruination over overt violence, cast doubt. A red herring in the form of her gown's matching fabric, perhaps planted to divert from another's guilt. Poirot noted her fleeting glances toward Miss Langton, hinting at an unspoken connection, a veil of alliance amid the deceptions. As midday approached, the hotel's routines resumed with forced normalcy, maids airing linens, porters ferrying luggage. Yet the atmosphere remained thick with intrigue. Poirot, retreating to his suite, with his balcony overlooking the now calming sea, arranged his toiletries upon the dressing table with ritualistic order. The silver-backed brushes aligned, the cologne bottles symmetrically placed. "The mind, Hastings. It must be as orderly as this tableau," he explained to his companion, who paced the room with English restlessness. "The veils of deception, they are manifold. The planted hair, the forged ledgers, the inconsistent chronologies. Each suspect cloaks their motive, greed, jealousy, revenge, in layers of artifice." Hastings, ever the foil, proposed eagerly. "The secretary, Poirot, spurned love is a classic impetus, or the doctor, with his access to poisons." "Non, mon ami," Poirot replied, his eyes distant as he gazed at the horizon. "The poison was in the cocktail glass, but who administered it? The lantern swings like a pendulum, marking the passage of truth. We must penetrate these veils, expose the hidden alliances and psychological fissures." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the gardens, where gendarmes combed for further evidence. A discarded glove, perhaps, or a whispered conversation overheard. But Poirot knew that the true revelations lay not in the physical remnants, but in the labyrinthine corridors of the human soul. The sinister night had given way to a day of deceptions, each layer peeled, revealing yet another, as the storm's aftermath left the Riviera glistening with false promise. Chapter 4. The Tightening Net. As the afternoon sun climbed higher over the French Riviera, casting a golden haze upon the Hôtel des Lanternes, the establishment's facade of unassailable luxury began to crack under the weight of mounting suspicions. The terraced gardens, now drying in the gentle breeze that carried the scent of salt and pine, bore the scars of the previous night's storm, uprooted flowers, scattered leaves, and the lingering puddles that mirrored the fragmented sky. Within the hotel's opulent confines, however, the atmosphere thickened like a gathering fog, each guest ensnared in a web of scrutiny that grew ever tighter. The gendarmes patrolled the corridors with officious zeal, their boots echoing on the marble floors, while whispers among the staff, maids exchanging furtive glances, porters lingering near doorways, added to the pervasive sense of unease. The Mediterranean, visible from the salon's windows, sparkled deceptively, its surface calm belying the turbulent depths below. Hercule Poirot, with his unerring instinct for the dramatic, had orchestrated a series of private confrontations, transforming the hotel's library, a room of leather-bound volumes, heavy oak shelves, and diffused light from leaded windows, into his impromptu chamber of truths. Inspector Giraud, though begrudgingly, had acquiesced to Poirot's request for discretion, his moustache bristling with the frustration of a man who preferred the blunt instrument of authority over the subtle scalpel of psychology. "Proceed, Monsieur Poirot," he conceded with a wave of his hand. "But mark my words, the evidence shall speak louder than your grey cells." Captain Hastings, positioned by the fireplace, where embers glowed faintly, served as both witness and confidant, his earnest face reflecting a mixture of admiration and bewilderment at his friend's methods. The first to be summoned was Madame Elise de la Roche, who entered the library with the grace of a queen attending her own trial. Her raven hair, now elegantly coiled, framed a face pale from strain, her emerald eyes holding a defiance tempered by exhaustion. She seated herself opposite Poirot, her hands folded in her lap with deliberate composure. "Madame," Poirot began, in his mellifluous tone, leaning forward slightly. "The veils of deception, they part slowly, but inexorably. Your disagreement with the Comte near the lantern, it was more than trifling, non? Voices raised, passions ignited, perhaps over his latest indiscretion?" Her lips tightened, the pearl necklace at her throat rising and falling with her quickened breath. "You pry into private sorrows, Monsieur Poirot." Yes, I confronted him. His dalliances with that secretary, they were the final insult. But murder, I am a de la Roche. We do not stoop to poison. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he produced the torn silk fragment. "And this, madame, from your gown, caught upon the bush. Planted, you claim, or a remnant of your presence." She faltered, her psychology, that cauldron of suppressed jealousy, bubbling to the surface. I may have brushed against it in haste, but I swear I did not administer the cyanide." Her motive, the unencumbered inheritance, hung in the air like a damning spectre, yet Poirot sensed a thread of truth amid the deceptions, a red herring perhaps woven by another's hand. Next came Monsieur Henri Duval, his sharp features drawn taut as he strode in, his ambitious glint now shadowed by defensiveness. He refused the offered seat, preferring to pace before the shelves, his hands clasped behind his back. "Monsieur Duval," Poirot inquired with feigned mildness, "your financial entanglements with the Comte, they run deeper than mere disputes, oui? The forged ledgers in your suite, they paint a portrait of desperation." Duval halted, his thin moustache quivering with outrage. "Forgeries. Someone, perhaps that vindictive baroness, planted them to incriminate me. I admit, he owed me a fortune from our Egyptian venture, but I am no assassin." Poirot nodded sagely, revealing the discarded vial. "And this cyanide container, found in the arbour, your footprints lead there. A suicide attempt, you say? Or a convenient misdirection?" Duval's opportunist soul cracked under the pressure, his voice dropping to a hoarse whisper. "Very well. I procured the cyanide, intending to end my woes if he refused payment. But I did not use it on him. See here, the timeline. I was with the Baroness during the toast." His admission, while illuminating a personal despair, served as a red herring, diverting from the true orchestration, yet tightening the net around his ambitions. Miss Sophia Langton followed, her timidity now a fragile shell as she entered, her blonde tresses dishevelled and her downcast eyes red-rimmed from tears. She sank into the chair, clutching her reticule as if it were a talisman. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said softly, his voice a balm to her evident distress. "The blonde hair upon the lantern cord. It is yours, as you conceded, and the cuffling, torn in struggle. Evidence of a confrontation?" Her resentful heart poured forth in a torrent. He promised marriage, elevation from my station. But it was all lies. I followed him to the garden, begged him to reconsider, and in the scuffle, the cufflink came loose. But the poison, I swear, I did not touch his glass. Poirot's gaze probed gently. And your glances toward Madame de la Roche. An alliance, perhaps, or jealousy compounded. She shook her head vehemently, her psychology unveiling layers of wounded pride and unrequited longing. No alliance, only shared sorrow. She knew of his betrayals. This revelation hinted at complicity, yet Poirot discerned a misdirection, the hair perhaps planted to frame the vulnerable secretary. Dr. Paul Renaud entered with his customary calm, his spectacles reflecting the room's muted light as he adjusted them with precise fingers. He took the seat with professional poise, though Poirot noted a faint tremor in his hands. "Doctor," Poirot commenced, "your access to poisons is unimpeachable, and the blackmail note, it ties you to the Baroness's past tragedy, a misdiagnosis that cost her kin dearly, non? The Comte, he knew, and threatened exposure." Renaud's inscrutable facade fractured, his voice measured but strained. "Yes, he wielded it like a weapon, demanding silence on his own illicit dealings. But I am bound by the Hippocratic oath, do no harm." Poirot presented the timeline gap. "Yet during the gala's mingling, you were absent, ostensibly attending a guest. Opportunity, motive, the net tightens." Renaud confessed partially. "I covered for a colleague's error long ago, but murder, never." His secretive profile, haunted by ethical shadows, positioned him as a prime suspect, yet a red herring emerged in his alibi, corroborated by a porter. The Baroness Olga von Strass was last, sweeping into the library with the imperious air of one accustomed to command. Her silver hair gleamed under the light, her steely eyes meeting Poirot's without flinching. "Baroness," he said with respect tinged with challenge, "your vendetta over the stolen heirloom, it festers like an old wound. And the silk scarf matching the fragment, your methods, you say, are refined, but poison is subtle indeed." She laughed scornfully, a sound like cracking ice. Refined, yes. I would ruin him socially, not with crude toxins. The scarf was stolen from my room, planted to ensnare me. Poirot pressed. And your alliance with the doctor, mutual silence or conspiracy? Her vindictive soul flashed. Silence, nothing more. But mark this, that secretary she simmers with rage. Duval reeks of greed. Her deflections, masterful in their poise, served as misdirection, yet tightened the net around the collective deceptions. As evening approached, the library's shadows lengthened, the sun dipping toward the horizon in a blaze of crimson. Poirot, assembling the clues in his mind, the deep footprints suggesting a man's involvement, the planted hair and fabric as red herrings, the timeline inconsistencies weaving a pattern, pondered deeply by the window. Hastings, ever loyal, broke the silence. The partner, surely Poirot. Duval's desperation fits like a glove. Non, mon ami, Poirot replied, his moustache curling with insight. The net tightens, but the quarry eludes yet. The lantern swings like a pendulum of fate, illuminating the truth in its arc. Alliances hidden, motives veiled. We approach the revelation. Outside, the Riviera's calm belied the storm within, the guests retreating to their chambers under watchful eyes. The sinister night loomed anew, its secrets on the cusp of exposure. Chapter 5. The Revelation Beneath the Light. As twilight descended once more upon the French Riviera, enveloping the Hôtel des Lanternes in a mantle of deepening indigo, the establishment's grand salon was transformed into a theatre of justice. The storm of the previous night had abated, leaving behind a crisp clarity in the air, scented with the faint brine of the sea and the earthy renewal of rain-washed gardens. The Mediterranean, now a serene expanse mirroring the first twinkling stars, lapped gently at the cliffs below, its rhythm a counterpoint to the palpable tension within. The salon's chandeliers, fashioned in the likeness of cascading crystals, cast a soft, diffused luminescence that mimicked the swaying Chinese lanterns of the fateful gala. Lanterns now repaired and relit in the gardens beyond the French doors, their ethereal glows serving as silent sentinels to the unfolding drama. Hercule Poirot, the architect of this climactic assembly, had orchestrated the gathering with his customary precision, dispatching discreet missives to each suspect under the auspices of a final debriefing. Inspector Giraud, his brusque demeanour tempered by a grudging respect for the Belgian's acumen, stood sentinel by the doors, his gendarmes positioned unobtrusively along the walls. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful chronicler, occupied a chair near the fireplace, his notebook at the ready, his honest face alight with anticipation. The suspects arrived in succession, their entrances a procession of varied psychologies. Madame Elise de la Roche, her elegance undiminished but her emerald eyes shadowed by apprehension. Monsieur Henri Duval, his sharp features etched with wary calculation. Miss Sophia Langton, her timidity now a veil for quiet defiance. Dr. Paul Renaud, his spectacles gleaming with feigned composure. And the Baroness Olga von Strass, regal and unyielding, her steely gaze sweeping the room like a sovereign assessing her court. Poirot, positioned at the room's centre upon a raised dais, improvised from a Persian rug and a low table, surveyed the assemblage with the serenity of a conductor before his orchestra. His diminutive frame, impeccably attired in evening dress, belied the formidable intellect within. His waxed moustache curled with mathematical exactitude, and his green eyes sparkled with the thrill of revelation. Mesdames et messieurs, he began in his precise, accented timbre, the salon falling into a hush broken only by the distant murmur of waves. We convene beneath these lights, symbolic non, of the lanterns that witnessed the Comte Victor de la Roche's demise, to pierce the veils of deception and illuminate the truth. The murder, it was a crime of exquisite subtlety, executed with cyanide beneath that swaying orb, a beacon turned to harbinger of death. But the little grey cells, they have toiled without respite, unravelling the threads of motive, opportunity, and artifice. The guests shifted uneasily, their faces a mosaic of feigned innocence and concealed dread. Madame de la Roche clutched her pearls, Duval's hands clenched into fists. Langton's eyes darted furtively. Renaud adjusted his spectacles with a tremor, and the Baroness maintained her icy poise. Poirot continued, his voice weaving through the room like a silken thread. Let us commence with the method. The cyanide, tasteless and swift, administered via the Comte's cocktail glass. The scent of bitter almonds, it lingered like a ghost. But who poured the fatal draught? The clues, they abound. Footprints in the soft earth, deep and masculine. A blonde hair upon the lantern cord, a torn silk fragment, a discarded vial, forged ledgers, blackmail notes, timeline inconsistencies, each a piece in the grand mosaic. He turned first to Madame de la Roche, his gaze compassionate yet unrelenting. Madame, your jealousy, it burned like a hidden flame. The Comte's infidelities, they wounded deeply, and the inheritance beckoned as salve. Your presence near the lantern, the raised voices, opportunity abounded. The silk fragment from your gown snagged in haste, a damning clue. She gasped, her composure fracturing. He was planted, Monsieur Poirot. I confronted him, yes, but left him alive. Poirot nodded. Précisément. A red herring, sown to ensnare you. Your motive potent, but your psychology, that of restrained passion, does not align with such overt poison. Next, his attention shifted to Duval. Monsieur Duval, your ambition. It is a voracious beast. Financial disputes, forged ledgers in your suite. They scream of desperation. Your footprints lead to the arbour, the vial procured for suicide, or murder. Duval rose, his voice strident. The forgeries were planted. I sought repayment, not his life. Poirot smiled enigmatically. Indeed, another misdirection. Your opportunism stops short of homicide. The timeline places you with the Baroness. An alliance of convenience, perhaps, but not conspiracy. Miss Langton's turn elicited a softer tone. Mademoiselle, your heart, wounded by unrequited promises, festered into resentment. The blonde hair, yours, entangled in the cord during a scuffle. The torn cufflink, a memento of struggle. Tears welled in her eyes. I begged him, yes, but the poison. I knew nothing. Poirot inclined his head. The hair, planted to frame your fragility, your psychology, that of the spurned innocent, veils no killer's intent. The Baroness von Strass met his gaze with defiance. Baroness, your vindictiveness, it is legendary. The stolen heirloom, a grudge nursed across decades. The silk scarf matching the fragment. Your tie to the doctor's blackmail. She laughed coldly. Revenge? I would have savoured his ruin publicly, not in shadows. Poirot concurred. Oui, your methods are grand, not petty. The fragment, another planted deceit. Finally, Poirot's eyes fixed upon Dr. Renaud, who stiffened imperceptibly. Ah, doctor, your calm. It is the mask of the haunted. The blackmail note, your past error. A misdiagnosis costing the Baroness's kin. The Comte wielded it mercilessly, demanding complicity in his shady antiquities. Your access to cyanide unimpeachable. Your absence during the mingling, a medical check on the Comte himself. Renault's spectacles slipped slightly. Preposterous. I am a healer. Poirot's voice rose, commanding. Non. The footprints, deep masculine yours. The vial from your dispensary, fingerprints smudged but traceable. The timeline. You approached under guise of concern, slipped the poison into his glass amid the shadows of the swaying lantern. The red herrings, the hair from Miss Langton, stolen from her comb, the silk from Madame's gown snipped in secret, the forgeries in Duval's room, your handiwork to scatter suspicion, your psychology, doctor, that of the secretive guardian driven to extremity by threat of ruin, betrays you. The room erupted in gasps. Renault stood, his calm shattering like glass. Enough. He would expose me, destroy my life, my reputation. It was a moment of desperation, the cyanide quick and merciful. I meant only to silence him, not. But the dose. He crumpled, confessing fully as Giraud's gendarmes advanced, cuffs at the ready. Poirot nodded gravely. Order and method triumph over chaos. The lantern's light, it reveals all. As Renault was led away, the tension dissolved like mist under the sun. Madame de la Roche wept in relief. Duval exhaled audibly. Langton smiled tremulously, and the Baroness inclined her head in acknowledgement. Hastings approached, awestruck. "Brilliant, Poirot. How did you know?" "The little grey cells, mon ami. They see the pattern where others see fragments." Outside, the Riviera night unfolded in tranquility, the lanterns glowing benevolently once more. Justice served, the sinister veil lifted, leaving only the stars to witness the resolution.